A lot of people have said, "What? There were so many stairs on this one," or "I didn't even know where the trail was." And in my opinion, I'm like, wasn't it fun though? You know, like, wasn't it really pretty because of that?
This is textbook type 2 fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome to In the Parks, an Indiana State Parks podcast. I'm Allison Martin, and I'm excited to tell the stories of these amazing places in the Hoosier State. I think our parks show off the best of Indiana, but there's so much more to them than you might expect. It's time to go in-depth to really know the stories and discover what makes each destination unique and valuable as part of Indiana. On In the Parks, you'll learn about the people, legends, and places that formed Indiana's parks in the past and who is writing the story now. Today we're going to the Shades State Park. What are your assumptions about Shades State Park? I had the general idea that it was kind of this rebel park where only extreme hikers and campers go, that it was an absolute favorite for those hardcore enough to survive, and almost a secret for people who like their trails quiet, rugged, and challenging. So of course I was like, why not go to the hardest park and do the 6 ravine challenge? And those ravines were no joke. I managed to talk a couple friends into joining me, and we ended up doing the entire challenge, plus we tacked on Trail 2, since there were some features that sounded really cool to see. And they were. Silver Cascade Falls was my favorite spot, even though it involved a ridiculous amount of stairs. In total, we hiked over 7 miles with more than 1,100 feet of ascent, and it was awesome. I really liked Shades. But we didn't get over to Trail 10 or the Pine Hills Nature Preserve. I hiked that section of Shades in early April, and then I totally fell in love with the park. I was the only person in the preserve. The spring ephemeral flowers were starting to pop up, trees were budding, the creek water was flowing fast and clear after a ton of rain, and it was magical. I only slipped into the creek twice, but it was worth it for the view from Devil's Backbone. Hands down, it's the prettiest hike I've done in Indiana. Shades is known for its hiking, and if you look at the listed park activities, there really isn't much more than that. You can camp too, but that's it. You won't find a nature center, inn, pool, or basketball court here, but they have some great programs, which I'll get into later. So from my hiking experiences, it sure seemed like Shades was fitting the assumptions I had about it, except for one thing.
It was not a rebel state park at the beginning. It was like, I don't know, I just love hearing all the different iterations of it. It feels like a girl or guy growing up who's like, you know, really precocious as a kid, and then they hit that phase when they're a teenager, they're like, whatever, mom, I'm not doing what I'm doing. And you're trying to help guide them now into their like young adult phase where they can keep that rebellious side, but also like, let's get you set up so you can pay their mortgage and get a job, and let's get a few events going for you here.
I think that's so funny. I love that. I actually, I love the Rebel State. I think it should still be the Rebel State Park.
As I heard the history of the Shades, I was really delighted to discover all the sides of this park's personality. And you may be surprised too. Like, did you know there were 2 old movies filmed there? Pretty cool. And to be honest, all the different names for this area certainly add to the park's dark reputation. The Shades, or the Shades of Death. But it was also called the Yosemite of Indiana, and once it was a park named Garlandell. Most Indiana parks are named after a nearby town, geographic feature, a piece of Native American history, maybe even a person. But the Shades, as many older Hoosiers still call it, has the most mystery and lore connected to it. So let's start with the gruesome history of how this park got its name. We'll hear from park naturalist Jenny Matthews, and we'll officially meet her later.
My name is Jenny Matthews. I am the naturalist, the interpretive naturalist for both Turkey Run and Shades State Parks. The Shades was a huge one, and that was more for the shaded trees, how actually forested and deep woods you were in when you were here. The Shades of Death was also another nickname that it had, and that was because of multiple murders, actual confirmed murders that happened here, and then also a lot of lore.
Are all the stories true?
Some of them are more just this is what happened here, and some of them are definitely more based in lore. And so things like areas of the park like Lover's Leap, that has a lot of lore behind it. We don't know what actually is true or not. Yeah. And then there is a lot of just word of mouth stories passed down, Native American stories and stuff as well. So, but a lot of stuff, a lot of reasons contributing to the name.
A few of the stories of murders we know are definitely true, and Jenny shared a couple with me. The most prominent story goes back to 1836.
Essentially, Moses Rush was a man who was murdered here. His wife, Mrs. Rush is what she's referred, Mrs. Moses Rush, is what her name is referred to. But she was only 17 and he was middle-aged is what it said. Apparently he was a very well-known abusive alcoholic. His threats to his wife, like to Mrs. Rush, were very well known as well. And so a lot of times vocally in front of other people and stuff as well. But then according to her, he would threaten her with his axe, like sharpening his axe.
With a 17-year-old wife, Moses put her to work doing the household chores in their cabin along Sugar Creek. And she worked on the farm too. We don't know exactly where it was, but definitely on park property.
The story goes that, and again this is true, she had found a sheep that had just been killed, and so she took the hide from it and was going to make a jacket or a coat with it, and she had come home very excited about this, and her husband Moses was very upset that she did not spend her time that day getting the chores done. And so he was muttering under his breath, this is the day, sharpening his axe is how the story goes. And so she thought, okay, this is actually the day, this is going to happen. And so when he passed out drunk that night, she murdered him with the axe that he had threatened her with many times. So she immediately...
Like chopped off his head?
Nope, just into the head. No head was chopped off. It used to be said that it was, but we don't think that actually happened. We just think that she...
Axe to the skull is enough.
The skull, yeah, that did it. But she actually immediately turned herself in, like made it the 15 miles to Crawfordsville to turn herself in, say, I did this. But she was immediately acquitted because the jury knew this man very well. And the judge literally said, like, quote, a case of self-defense done with commendable promptness. So,
done with commendable promptness. Sounds like the community wasn't too upset about the death of Moses Rush. We know nothing about Mrs. Moses Rush, not even her first name. I hope she got a happy ending somehow. The second true story of murder happened in 1865, the Wineland murders.
And it says Milton Wineland was a laborer. He lived with his father and mother on a farm in the southwest corner of what is now Shades. The boy, while young, had little parental restraint and spent his time hunting, fishing, and trapping. He was an only child of fond and doting parents, and so he dominated the household. As he grew, he became tall and well-formed. His father never used force to correct him, but gave him his every whim. The neighbor said his parents whipped him with a broom straw, then give him sugar to keep him from crying.
Whipped him with a broom straw. I've never heard that expression before, but it definitely sounds like gentle parenting to the extreme. Jenny and I laughed about that for a while before she kept going.
Milton squandered large sums of money his father gave him. When his father and mother took a nephew in to live with them, Milton started thinking it over. Maybe they would make cousin their heir instead of himself. Okay, yeah, this is
a little jealousy.
Yep. Soon he left his parents' home and married. They lived along the Wabash River in a cabin about 20 miles from his former home. In no time, he spent all his money but continued to nurse his jealous feelings until they festered into fury. Then he returned for his last visit. Stealthily, he approached the old homestead, a double-barreled shotgun in his arms. His father and his cousin were at this time gathering corn in the field. Milton took aim and blasted both with a shotgun. Then he ran.
Hadn't this kid heard the prodigal son story in the Bible? He just needed to come home and apologize, and he would have had a fattened calf prepared for him. Instead, he literally came in guns blazing.
His mother offered a reward of $1,000 for the capture of the criminal. A posse formed, and Milton was hunted down and shot while trying to escape in a skiff on the Wabash. Pity the scene when Milton is brought back to her a corpse. His mother buried him in the neighboring cemetery in spite of much protest by the community.
Jenny said she's pretty sure Milton is buried in one of the two nearby cemeteries, but hasn't had a chance to check. But this poor woman, Milton's mother, her only son killed her husband and favorite nephew, and then a posse finds him and shoots him as he tries to escape? She lost 3 men in her life because of jealousy. There are many more legends and lore you can look into, from Native American nations who once lived on the land to criminals hiding out in the hills. Is it any wonder that when the land entered the state park's family, people wanted to do a little light rebranding?
Like when it was becoming a state park, like they didn't want that anymore. They didn't want the connotation. They wanted it all to be very positive. But I mean, it still hangs around today. Like people ask me about that all the time.
With trails and features named things like Devil's Punch Bowl, Lover's Leap, and Devil's Backbone, you can see why people are still fascinated with the dark side of the park. But what I found really interesting was that even with all these legends, a large portion of the park's history was actually full of vitality, energy, and positivity. So let's hear about that too. It's now time to officially meet Jenny Matthews. She worked at McCormick's Creek as a seasonal naturalist while studying geology at IU. She fell in love with the job then, so when a chance to work as the interpretive naturalist at Turkey Run and Shades came up, she was excited.
Geologically speaking, these two places are so fantastic, and so I was really eager to jump on that opportunity.
The geology of Shades is one of the features that drew Jenny to the job, and that's what has drawn people to the area for generations. You might say the geology is actually the bedrock of the area's cultural history. Jenny explained the ravines were formed along Sugar Creek due to the limestone base, then a layer of sandstone. Add several glacial events, and that's actually what makes Shades so unique, even from Turkey Run, which is only about 15 miles away.
When it stopped moving, it stopped a few miles north of Shades State Park, and so that meltwater from that glacier is what carved out all of the ravines inside of the sandstone. There are still areas in this park that you actually can see the limestone underneath the sandstone. That unconformity right there is really cool because it just represents millions of years in between them. But the difference, between Shades State Park and Turkey Run State Park is you cannot see any of the limestone at Turkey Run, but you can here, which led to the cultural history, actually. The cultural history of Shades, it defines what makes this place so special. Like, the geology made it available to have a cultural history here.
The cultural history here is what really surprised me. As I mentioned before, I assumed Shades has always been the rugged, isolated rebel park. So Jenny's history lesson was not what I expected. And if you've spent time at Shades, it might surprise you too. The history of Shades goes back to 1818 with the Treaty of St. Mary's, where Indiana's boundaries were extended after a treaty was signed with Miami.
And so that treaty then left this section of Montgomery County for sale. And so with that, then we had the first buyer of Shades State Park, and his name was Benjamin Garland. So he then propagated what was later to become Garlandells. Garlandells was his private park. Part of that comes with the conservation of this area, so that's always nice.
Yeah, so he did have a concern for that too.
Yeah,
that's great.
Exactly.
There were also 2 mills on the edges of what is now the park property. One of those mills on the northern edge was built by Joel Deere along Sugar Creek. The Deere's Mill covered bridge still stands there today. If you're into covered bridges, there's a small parking lot next to it where you can park and walk across the bridge. My friends and I checked it out, and it's still really pretty. So while parts of the park were deforested, the area Garland owned is still full of old growth trees, and that's where the real story is. Remember, the geology of Shades is limestone and sandstone, which made this place a real find in the late 1800s because it housed something everyone wanted: mineral springs. And while the area had been known as the Shades of Death, Garland gave it a little happier identity.
It was 1886 when the Garlandells Mineral Spring Association took place. So the mineral springs during that time, if you're familiar, huge. Having access to fresh running spring water was a health rejuvenation era. And basically it's groundwater, that's what it is, coming out of springs, but you don't get springs unless you have limestone.
For Benjamin Garland, discovering these mineral springs on his private park was a real treasure because of what people thought about them at the time. And the Garlandell Mineral Springs Association came out of this.
Yeah, so at first it was, we have this here. This is a luxury area. It was already a private park, and in that private park was boat rentals, hiking, a lot of attractive, nice, lovely aspects of the park. But with it too was these mineral springs, and there were 11 of them, but 3 of them were very popular: the Spring of Youth, Beauty, Health, all of these things, and they all had different properties. One was more sulfuric, one had more sodium, and one was more magnesium. And
so think West Baden and that kind of era. These mineral springs were thought to be therapeutic. Drinking and bathing in the water was supposed to improve your health.
During that time, that was it. If you are familiar with French Lick, that was it. Mineral spring or spring waters, the bathhouses, the sanitariums, all of that. It was just a luxury area to bathe in. And we actually have a picture of a little boy next to the Spring of Youth sign, which is so cool. We haven't identified all of the springs here, all of the 11. We have identified, I think, 5 of them.
The mineral springs really did have different levels of sulfur and magnesium, but even in the 1880s, medical professionals were skeptical of the claims that mineral-rich water would do anything for your health.
It was actually funny because I think it was the director of health at the time. I could be wrong on that, but he had come out here to test the water. It was proven then that like they really didn't have any restorative properties at all. Like it was like this like very blunt statement.
So he was like a marketing influencer over like 100, 200 years ago.
Yeah. And then later actually, so the inn was built, or the Dell House is what it was called, the inn. That came later as well. But when that was built, it really took off. Like everything took off here. But they actually bottled the mineral water in the basement, so to sell to people. So
1880s or 2025, we're still getting suckered by rebranding, creative marketing, and tapping into a desire to live forever through all natural products. I don't actually think they were intentionally misleading people. Garland Dell Mineral Springs Association had a product they believed would help people and developed the property to do that.
It really attracted people from everywhere. And 1886 was when the Mineral Springs Association, 87, so a year after, was when the Dell House was erected, so when the inn was built. They offered, obviously, meals, rooms. I think there were 40 rooms. There were also cabins. It was beautiful. Here's that picture that I was talking about, the Spring of Youth.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the inn looked like.
Oh, that's really pretty.
It's huge, right?
It almost is like a southern plantation style house.
Yeah, it's beautiful, all of those windows.
Well, and then the flowers out front. So I guess if you see what daffodils blooming
Yeah, it's
here,
daffodils.
it's probably close
Yes.
to where the inn was.
Exactly. There was a dance hall that was attached to the entrance, the pavilion, and that was also something that was so big during that time.
The Dell Mineral Springs Association did more than provide physical health aids for people. They also hosted a social event that was a popular movement across America in the early 1900s, a Chautauqua. I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable about U.S. history, but I'd never heard of these before. They were started in Chautauqua, New York by a Methodist Episcopal minister, but eventually evolved into more of a traveling symposium. It was basically like going to a 1900s version of South by Southwest. Or think of a live podcast plus concert with your favorite speakers and bands who provide motivation, inspiration, humor, and hope, under a circus tent, for 2 weeks. Chautauquas were held in rural areas, drew massive crowds, and featured popular speakers like William Jennings Bryan, whose name you may vaguely know as important in politics, or Carrie Nation, an early member of the Prohibition movement, and Chautauquas came to this area.
Shades was one of the places that hosted it. Obviously having like the inn, having this beautiful area, the cabins, the horseback riding, being on Sugar Creek, having the boating, it was huge. And while I know that they don't have like numbers for the audience, but they had prepped like 5,000 people attending one of them, so we know that the numbers are really up there.
Yeah.
It was such a booming place.
By this point, the man making the visionary decisions for the Dell Mineral Springs was named Joseph Fritz, the president of the association. He grew the property into a thriving, innovative leader in mental, moral, social, and physical health and development. As Fritz aged, his children asked him about selling off the land to a timber company, but like Benjamin Garland, he refused. Both men believed in the restorative powers of nature. But after his death, the property's popularity started to wane.
Now 1940 rolls around and Joseph Fritz passed away. And so his family, his kids, they can't keep up with all of the demands. And honestly, at that time, the inn had started to lose some of its pizzazz. By 1940s, things had started to slip a little bit.
It's such an interesting contrast because when I think about all of the state parks today, Shades is the one that has the most rebel attitude kind of thing to it, because it's almost like it's like the cool kid of the state parks, where it's like, we're really awesome and we're really rugged and not everybody knows about us, but everybody who does is in love with us.
Yeah.
But it seems so rugged, and then all of this stuff you're saying is it was so ahead of its time, and kind of cutting edge in marketing and movies and all this stuff. And then to see where it is now, it's really funny that it's the same land.
It's so this, everything you just described, that is 100% how I feel about it all of the time, because uncovering all of this history, what it used to be, I don't know, imagining the music that was playing and just the hustle and bustle, and people drove 2 railroads to come here, you know what I mean? It was so much bigger, and then it all just kind of went quiet. So
The nation had survived a world war, the Great Depression, another war was on the horizon. Plus, nearby Turkey Run State Park had an inn and was growing in popularity. With Fritz's death, his adult children couldn't manage the property, and in 1947 worked with the state to purchase the land. but it took the community coming together to really save the shades.
They entered an agreement to purchase the shades. The shades, it was like $300,000 that they were going to buy it for, but then they don't have the money. The negotiations fell through, and then the Save the Shades campaign took spark. So the Save the Shades was everywhere. It was in papers. By 48, it was done. Like, they had saved the shades, and so it became the 15th state park in Indiana in 48.
After Shades was purchased for the state, the Dell House remained, and there was even a grass airstrip for small planes and helicopters to land. The airstrip is now a pollinator field and the perfect spot for stargazing, but more on that later. By the late 60s, the Dell House was demolished after fire damage.
With that gone, a lot of the other stuff went too.
So it seems like then what the 70s and 80s is maybe where the park kind of lost the kind of cutting edge side of it that it would have had,
And it became a little bit more of what we see of it today.
Yeah, what we see then, today is definitely the rugged beauty that is out here. The draw to this place is like the running water in the ravines, and it always has been, like even with the springs, and it's rugged. It was actually known as coined the Yosemite of Indiana for a long time. Like, that's pretty crazy, and that just really shows how wilderness and like rugged this place actually really is.
Along with the rugged parts of the Shades, in the 1950s and 60s, the state purchased more land or had land donated to expand the park. One of those areas is my favorite section of Shades, the Pine Hills Nature Preserve. It was actually the first nature preserve in the state. So let's pause here a moment and learn what makes that area so special.
So much of the flora inside of there is so unique because of the geology that influenced everything growing here. Especially like even just the hemlocks that we have around here, not common. But they need like that rocky, unconsolidated, cliffy sandstone to grow on, and we have so much of it. And then the ferns, the orchids, we have mosses in there. Like, there are just so many things that are unique.
I talked with Jenny before I hiked in Pine Hills. I'd seen pictures of people up on a high, narrow ridge, and they were so cool, but also a little scary looking.
The fact that, like, presumably you're up pretty high, but there's no rails at all, I was like, oh,
for
gosh.
sure. And you have to like climb up there to get to, like, you're like climbing up there. It's no joke, and some people hate it.
I did not hate it. I loved it. To access the nature preserve, you head to the east side of the park. There's a parking lot and bathroom near the end of Trail 10. You walk through the edge of the park proper, cross 234, and go over some wooden steps into Pine Hills Nature Preserve. It does feel like you're stepping into something new. The trail's essentially a loop, so you don't need a map, but it has some information about what you're seeing, so I'll include a link to one in the show notes. At first, it's a really easy trail that slowly winds through the trees. Then you reach the backbones, and the landscape totally changes. The backbones, around 100 feet high, were created as glacial melt carved channels through the bedrock. The meandering curves cut deeper and deeper, leaving high ridges behind in the area between its curves. Turkey Backbone looks down on Clifty Creek. If you can't handle stairs, you'll get an awesome view, but will need to turn back here. Otherwise, you'll descend into the lower creek area to explore. There's plenty to see here without doing any crazy climbing. Evidence of an old mill, honeycomb rock, the creek, and tons of unique trees. If you want the view from Devil's Backbone, there are 2 ways to reach it. Both involve crossing the creek. I was there when the water was fairly high and managed to get across mostly dry. I went up the west side, passing Honeycomb Rock. I stood at the place where Clifty and Indian Creeks meet for a long time, soaking in the beauty. The climb to Devil's Backbone this way is rooty and steep, but I stayed on 2 feet. The climb from the other side is rocky, and I had to use my hands and feet to climb up and down. But the view from the top, wow. The ridge is about 4 feet wide and maybe 20 feet across. It's a steep 100-foot drop down both sides to the creek below, but there are plenty of trees, so I didn't feel like I was going to blow away. The ridge has lots of old carvings on it from the 1800s. I didn't spot the devil face, but I did see doves or pigeons. Being up there alone was really incredible. Peaceful, beautiful, it felt like time stood still. I finally climbed down the rocky side, crossed the creek again, this time soaking both feet, and began the trek back up the stairs to Turkey Backbone before returning to the park. That kind of hiking is what people know about Shades today. The murders, mineral springs, the inn, the dance pavilion, the Chautauquas, they're all parts of its past. Shades has left those sins and precocious pursuits of its childhood behind, and over the past 40 years, has become a mature, introspective park, maybe with a side of moody rebellion. Nowadays, Jenny splits her time between Turkey Run and Shades.
The focus, I feel, of Shades, which being a naturalist at both Turkey Run and Shades, there's a huge dichotomy. My job is very different, it feels, at Turkey Run than it is at Shades.
Turkey Run tends to have more programs because it has the nature center, the pool, the inn, and some easier trails. Shades has more issues with invasives, so Jenny spends a lot of time doing resource management there. Plus, the people who visit Shades tend to want more quiet, rugged hiking. But one programming activity unique to Shades, and maybe to any state park, is their astronomy events.
But I focus all of our astronomy, anything astronomy-wise is out here, and it's actually going to become the first dark sky in Indiana, which is really cool. To be a dark sky, you just have to have extremely minimal light pollution already. So like within the general, mileage of a given area, it has to have minimal light pollution. The only light pollution that we really get from here is from Crawfordsville, which is 15, 20 miles away from here, which you can still see it a little bit like in the corner when you're out there. But for the most part, it is really dark out here. And that means that to be qualified as a dark sky, you have to not only have that already in place, like that we don't receive a lot of light pollution, but also kind of guarantee that you won't. So like anything on that property, all of the lights that we have, we had to convert them, which most of them already were, into downcasting instead of upcasting. But a lot of astronomers, like the astronomical societies that we have here in Indiana, they come out here to stargaze all of our meteor showers. Our biggest one is the Perseid meteor shower, and we host like a big watching event out here every year in August. And anything night sky related, I always choose to do out here at Shades, which is so much fun. And then I get people that will contact me about having like a permit to be out here at night.
Isn't that cool? I feel like this is really on brand for the Rebel Park to be into doing things in the middle of the night. Jenny said the Pollinator Field, which used to be the old airstrip, is the ideal spot for telescopes and stargazing. When I talked to Anita Garish with the Friends of Shades volunteers, she brought up the night events too.
We have astronomy groups that do most of their programs and activities at Shades because it's been designated as a dark sky area. It is awesome at nighttime at Shades. I mean, you can reach out and touch the Milky Way. It's just beautiful.
One of the astronomy groups that often uses Shades is the Wabash Valley Astronomical Society.
So a lot of times they will come out here like as a club, like this is a club of people that are astronomers, and they're awesome and they're great resources. I've actually like asked them to help me with my own telescope to like just do like a crash course. They're so nice. And they will come out here with their telescopes. They want a night to observe too. And so it's just a great opportunity for them to do it.
And after Jenny said all that about how great they are, I couldn't let an opportunity go by. So I got to interview George Wincott, the secretary for the Wabash Valley Astronomical Society. George has been interested in the sky since he was a kid.
I used to be a Boy Scout, and when I'd go camping out in the woods at night, you got nothing to do but look up at the sky. We'd see all the bright stars, and meteors would go zooming around, and it was neat. I got a little glow-in-the-dark planisphere that shows you what the constellations are like. Just was interested in it the rest of my life. Really didn't get seriously into it, buying a telescope and everything until the late 80s probably. It's one of those things that can be a lifelong hobby and interest.
As an adult, he's been active with the Wabash Valley Astronomical Society.
Our particular group is the Wabash Valley Astronomical Society, and we've been in the greater Lafayette area incorporated since 1971, and probably around a few years before that. We're just a bunch of astronomy geeks and people who enjoy looking at stars and things in the sky. We meet about once a month. We have roughly 45 to 50 members. We do quite a bit of outreach to the community and to the parks and whoever else would like to hear us.
In addition to the WVAS, there are other astronomical groups around the state, so George recommended seeing which one is closest to where you live. Initially, the Wabash Valley group did a meteor event at Turkey Run, but then they found the Shades. We
were asked to do an event at Shades where it's really dark, and we hadn't really appreciated how dark it was until we went there. They don't have very many lights there, and they're pretty well shielded. So we set up on one of the roads that was blocked off inside the park, set up telescopes, and people would come back there and we would show whatever we could show them in the sky. And it was really neat. Initially, there were just a few people, and then it seemed to grow every year.
The astronomy events are obviously weather dependent, but when they happen, the club tries to host programs at Turkey Run and Shades.
Our normal schedule there is we'll come down to Turkey Run in the afternoon and do some solar observing. We'll set up between the pool and the nature center with some type of solar telescope or solar filters, and look at sunspots and whatever else we can see. And then in the evening, we'll go over to Shades and set up, like I was mentioning, in someplace dark.
Summer's a great time for stargazing since it's warmer out, as long as you can handle staying up late.
I think in the past there have also been astronomy days at Shades where we would come usually around the summer solstice, third week in June, something like that, and look at some of the summer sky objects. One of the problems, though, is that at that time of the year, the sun doesn't set until really late. So people have to come, and we don't get started until 10:30 or something like that. So that was fun. And actually, one of the really neat things about being there at that time of the year are the fireflies. It's really dark, and the fireflies around the third week in June or so are just brilliant. It's like fireworks. You have to see it to believe it. I tried capturing it on my phone as a video. Did not come through at all, but anybody who gets a chance to see it will get quite a spectacle.
Another popular event has been around the Perseids meteor shower in August, so be looking for information about that. So what do you need to see the stars well? Yeah, if there are people who are interested in getting a telescope or getting involved, or they have kids who are, is there kind of an entry-level way to get started with that, or what would you recommend?
Well, we normally recommend that people start out by learning some of the constellations. You don't have to learn all of them. There are 88 constellations in total. You only need to learn the brighter ones, just a few in the north, south, east, and west. And then when we say that there's a particular nebula or galaxy in Orion or in Sagittarius, they'll know what part of the sky to look at. Binoculars are a great aid to get started because they can collect a lot more light than what our dinky little pupils can get. Those are instruments that we normally recommend before getting into telescopes.
For anyone thinking about getting their kids into astronomy, George also has some advice for what not to do.
We also recommend that parents not go out and buy some department store telescope that might cost $50 or so, but is wobbly, and you really can't aim it well. The optics might not be perfect, but usually it's the mount that's the problem. And the kid will get frustrated, put it in the closet, and never touch it again. We usually suggest putting a couple $100 into a good solid scope, good mount, and then it's much, much easier, much more enjoyable.
He also said the astronomy clubs are a real help for people getting interested.
I would just recommend finding a local astronomy club, and you'll be able to meet a lot of people who know about what's going on, and they'll let you look through telescopes so that you don't have to rush out and buy something first and then find that it's not the right thing. You try before you buy. So that's probably the main recommendation.
If you want to check out the stars with your friends or kids, there's a great event coming up at the end of July.
We have one of our main events every year is the Indiana Family Star Party, which occurs, this year will be July 22nd to 27th at Camp Cullum in Clinton County. This is the site of the Prairie Grass Observatory. Astronomers from states all around here will come and gather and set up their own telescopes. And usually on Friday and Saturday, it's open to the public. It's pretty cheap to get in. And we have programs for kids to learn about the sky. So we encourage people to come to that event if at all possible.
As for what to look for this year in the skies, George said there are some supermoons in the fall, and that's when Saturn and Jupiter are visible. But what's cool about the sky is that even though we may not realize it, it's constantly changing above us.
Each month is different in the sky because we go around the sun, we see different things each month, and so it becomes something new. You can be there in the spring at a public event and then come back in the fall and things are completely different.
If you want to learn more about astronomy, there are links to several clubs in the show notes, and be sure to see what events are being hosted at Shades this summer. Shades is an ideal place to see these awesome stars, meteors, and comets because it's far from any city, and because of its non-electric camping, which is another thing people love about it.
Part of the reason is because our campgrounds are primitive, so the ruggedness that you're talking about, that backpacking, hiking, we don't have any electrical hookups here in our campgrounds either. So if you're out here, like, and you want to be, like, with purpose.
The primitive camping is often used by scout groups, like what George did when he was a kid. Those dark sky experiences can really hook people to nature. If you're already hooked, in addition to the 105 non-electric sites, there are also 7 backpack and 10 canoe campsites, which you do need to reserve. Jenny said they're spectacular.
It's like a Narnia out there. It's really shaded and it's pretty moist, so everything is just covered in moss and it's really beautiful. So it's like a fairy tale. It's so gorgeous.
The immersive nature experience about Shades is something that's been consistent since its Garland Dell days. Their programs today are anchored in natural beauty. In addition to the Perseids meteor shower in August, the park has wildflower and night hikes, and a fun, fairly new Halloween event that Jenny put on with the help of the Friends of Turkey Run and Shades volunteer group. So let's meet Anita Garish, one of the Friends members, to hear what they do and why you should mark your calendar for the spookiest Halloween event.
My name's Anita Garish, and I'm actually the secretary of the Friends of Turkey Run and Shades State Park Friends Group. My husband and I both grew up in Park County, not far from Turkey Run and Shades. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in the parks hiking and picnicking, and they were just, really, that was about the only place that my family did a lot of vacationing with their, our busy lives. So the state parks kind of have always been a really special place for me.
Anita and her husband moved out of state for about 30 years, and when they came back to the area, she wanted to meet other people who shared her love of the outdoors. She ended up connecting with the Master Naturalist program.
And I had taken 3 or 4 different Master Naturalist classes just because I love it so much. I took them over and over again at different locations in the state. And I think that's how I discovered the Friends groups around the state and found out that my local one actually got to serve 2 of the best state parks in Indiana.
This was a great fit for Anita because of that deep love she has for nature.
Really, the biggest passion of mine is being outdoors and nature, and I've spent a lot of my time as a parent and as a grandparent trying to foster that love and appreciation of nature that I feel so strongly about.
Anita is a great example of whatever your skills are, the park can use you. She used her career as an editor, writer, and photographer to support the park by creating the Friends website and developing marketing plans for park events. So if you're not sure how to get involved, sometimes being part of the publicity for the park is a first step.
I would say that my biggest contributions to the group has been to make us more visible in the community and further afield.
Anita and the volunteers have contributed so much more to the park, like a purchase they made last year.
We bought and installed color correcting viewer on one of the lookouts so that when you are looking at the seasonal changes, people who have color blindness are able to look through this viewer and actually see the colors. That for me is one of my favorite times for Shades is in the fall when you get the fall colors, because it almost feels like you're looking out over a mountain pass. Some of those lookouts are so dramatic, and when you get the fall colors going, you stand at one of those vistas. It can almost move you to tears with the beauty of it.
And then there's the big Halloween event I mentioned, the Luminary Trail.
One of the funner things that we did at Shades last fall was a nighttime haunted trail hike, and different ones of the Friends members dressed up kind of spooky, and we had different stations kind of along Trail 1. So it was pitch dark and people had their little flashlights and hiked from location to location, and then we would give talks about the different animals. So like I did spiders, the talk I did with spiders, and I was dressed up kind of like a witch with spiders all over me because spiders are associated with witches and spells and things. Then I gave a talk about all of Indiana's spider species. One of the stations was about Indiana's bats. One of them was about the wolves that used to be in Indiana but that now now we have coyotes and foxes and things. And then somebody did a talk about owls. Somebody did a talk about snakes. It was really kind of educational stations, but we did it in kind of a spooky trail type setting.
Jenny said over 900 people showed up for the event last year, so be ready for treats, tricks, and of course, a little education. But back to Anita. The Halloween event goes along Trail 1, which is one of the most accessible ones at the park, for those not up to so many stairs and ravines. And it's Anita's favorite.
Trail 1 kind of gives me the overlooks that can just be breathtaking, besides, kind of taking me down into the Devil's Punch Bowl and walking the creeks and things. And if there's water running, you've got a little waterfall there. So, when people ask me what just an easy little trek through Shades is, Trail 1 is probably the one that I often throw out there.
In addition to Trail 1, Anita said coming back to the area has given her a deeper appreciation for the park.
Friends of ours that would travel through Indiana just kind of saw it probably from the ride on 65 or 70, where it's just kind of flat terrain. And I think they thought of Indiana as just kind of that prairie land. I think a lot of people don't realize how beautiful this area is. And I do feel lucky to have been able to come back here. It's kind of like I've just been re-exploring it. That's one of the things that's been really fun, moving back and having a little more time to really immerse myself in Shades and Turkey Run. They're just magical places where you can lose yourself in the woods. And I think it took me being less busy maybe to realize just how glorious those opportunities really are.
I loved Anita's reminder that there's so much more to this state if we'll only get off the highway and get in the parks. For decades, this park has been whatever people have needed it to be: a place for health and wellness, a social gathering to better the mind, a rugged trail to get lost in the woods, a dark night to let the stars provide perspective. The common thread is the land, the deep ravines, the incredible geology, the flowing creeks, and high ridges and vistas.
It's easier at Shades, I think, to find that quiet spot where maybe for just a few minutes, everything else disappears and just leaves you alone with the wonders of nature. I think that's one of my passions, is to try to make people understand that we do have such beauty right here in our own state if they, just take the time to kind of go look around.
If you haven't been to Shades yet, or maybe it's been a while, this is your sign to get out and explore everything we have in the parks. A big thank you goes to the Shades staff and volunteers who shared their time and knowledge with me. Thank you Anita Garish from the Friends of Turkey Run and Shades State Parks Volunteer Group, George Wincott from the Wabash Valley Astronomical Society, and Jenny Matthews from Shades State Park. In the Parks is not officially associated with Indiana DNR, but I'm so incredibly grateful for all the work they do for our parks. Please share this podcast with your friends, and if you could, leave it a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. You can follow along on Instagram and Facebook at In the Parks Online for more state parks content and my recommendations for the best places to get ice cream near each park. After completing the 6 Ravine Challenge, my friends and I drove over to Kingman, Indiana and hit up the Kingman Oasis. It was amazing food and ice cream. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the parks.